Welcome, we're your hosts Alicia
and Whitney
on Coming Up Higher, where we're creating space through conversations, special guests, and inspiration
for you to come up higher in the things of Christ in everyday life. Hey everyone, we have a powerful episode in store for you today. We're going to hear from Jodi Ballenger, who is an author and a speaker alongside her husband, Billy, who we'll be hearing from next week. They are just a powerful duo, but once you hear their backstory, you can just see why they have so much influence and authority in what they do, because they've literally been there and God's brought them out of the pit through being a 9-year-old and being introduced to drugs and everything that comes with that lifestyle and just brokenness, to finding God, finding her purpose, and ultimately writing this book, Beautifully Unbroken. It's just such a powerful testimony and just a redemptive story, just a beautiful picture of how God can take you and redeem you and make you into something completely new. So without further ado, let's go ahead and hear from Jodi herself. Everyone, welcome back to Coming Up Higher. We are Alicia and Whitney, and we are just really excited for the show today because we have an amazing lady that's going to be joining us. She's going to be talking about her life story that just really shows God's goodness and God's grace, and just how God can find us wherever we're at and just really help us to become who He's created us to be. So we want to go ahead and welcome Jodi Ballenger to the show.
Yes.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes,
Yeah.
and we're glad to have your husband Billy here as well. We're going to hear his story next week on next week's episode, but so grateful you guys took the time out to join us, and we're excited to dive deeper into your story, but also for our listeners to hear more about it as well.
Yes. Well, I'll just start off. When I was my testimony begins when I was 9. I had a pretty normal, growing up years until 9. But one day I came home from school. I was in 3rd grade, and there was a U-Haul in my driveway. I go in, the house is empty, and my mom says, "Hey, me and your dad are getting a divorce," very nonchalant, and we're moving in with my sister in Cleveland, Ohio.
Wow.
So as a 9-year-old, I'm torn because I love my dad. I don't want us to go, but then I also know, oh, wow, cool. I get to live with my cousins, So, I'm just 9. So within a week of me getting to my aunt's house in Cleveland, Ohio, I'm smoking pot. I'm popping pills. They were really large drug dealers. When I say large, I mean they had 13-gallon black trash bags filled to the rim with marijuana, not just one, but 5, 6 of them.
Oh my goodness.
When you would open up the refrigerator, and there may have been a little bit of food in there, but it was really to keep the pills cold and fresh. So there would be jars and jars of mason jars filled with every kind of pill you can imagine. And within a week, I was smoking pot, popping pills with my cousins that I lived with, and my life completely turned upside down.
Yeah.
So at 9 years old, this is, how everyone has milestones in their life. 9 years old is when I started doing drugs. By 11 years old, I'm in juvenile detention for the first time. 6th grade graduation, I'm in juvenile. 8th grade graduation, I'm in reform school. 12th grade graduation, I'm serving a 6-year prison term at the Indiana Women's Prison. 21 years old, I'm still in the women's prison. So my milestones, there was nothing normal about my life.
Yeah.
I was able to do anything I wanted whenever I wanted, but yet I craved someone to love me and to give me boundaries.
Yeah.
Now, if you would have asked me when I was, going through all that, it was the coolest thing in the world, but really it wasn't. And I knew that. And I wanted out, as I was 16 years old, I was ready to get out of this lifestyle because I would see people that had normal families. And, I lived in a household, at least 2 weeks out of the month, there was no food. So just crazy lifestyle. At 14 years old, I was living with my boyfriend that I had met in children's home. He later on, I ended up moving in with my dad because my dad found out that I was living with my boyfriend at 14, and he's like, "Oh no, you're moving in with me." Well, then I run away to be with my boyfriend. The police come and pick me up. Later that evening, my boyfriend was killed in a drunk driving. Yes. And we had just done, at 14 years old, he had turned me on to meth. So at 14 years old, I'm now on meth for the first time, go to the police come and get me, and then he dies later on that evening. And so just crazy. But
now, I'm going to say something real quick. When that happened, it was only, you were in juvenile when he's out partying after you went there and gets killed while she's incarcerated that night.
Yes.
Wow.
So I had been in trouble since I was 11 years old, in and out of juvenile, in and out of the children's home. At 13, I went through the Scared Straight program, and that's where they actually take you into the women's prison, and all the inmates are telling you why you need to, be good, listen to your parents, all that. And when I left there at 13, I thought, I will never go to the women's prison. Needless to say, at 19 years old, I'm walking in those doors going, oh, wow. Will they remember that it's me? But so I had been in and out of trouble since I was 11. So after my boyfriend had died, they decided, okay, we're going to send you out of county. And so they ended up placing me at White's Institute at the time. And I went there, and it was a faith-based home. And there was boys and girls on the campus. There was probably about 200 juveniles on campus, but I experienced the love of being around Christians, and we had to go to chapel 6 days a week.
Oh, man.
And so, I went there, and I didn't want to leave, but I didn't want to tell anyone either. You know what I'm saying? Because I'm this tough, 15-year-old.
Yeah.
But I just absolutely loved it there. And then Billy, my husband, and I ended up meeting at that reform school. And once we got out of reform school, he ended up running away and coming to Muncie, where I was. And then
sounds so romantic.
Right.
Even for any teenage listeners here today.
Yeah.
Yes. But so he's now coming into my lifestyle. He was raised in a pretty regular home, but then he came into my lifestyle, and we were able to do whatever we wanted, whenever we wanted. And so at 18, we got married when I was 17. He was 18. Our little girl was born that same year, like 6 months later. And that following year, we decided to start selling marijuana. We were just hanging out with the crowd that I had been hanging out with all my whole life. And our house was raided by a SWAT team. And one thing, probably a few weeks before this, I can remember us laying in bed at night, and we would talk about going to church. And because I remembered back at White's, the feeling I had. And and this was one day. So we were laying in bed and we were talking about it. And I was like, okay, maybe when we're 50, we'll go. You know, all the partying years had to get out of the way. When we're 50, we'll go. Well, a few weeks later, here we are. We're arrested. My little girl was taken out of my arms. Now, the detective that actually took her out of my arms, he was the same detective that at age 11 took me to juvenile for the first time. And he said, Jodi, you better straighten up. He was the same detective that came to Danny's house and got me and placed me in juvenile and said, Jodi, you better straighten up. Years later, he was the same detective that walked in, took my 9-month-old little girl out of my arms and said, Jodi, I wish you would have straightened up. And turned around and walked out the door with my 9-month-old little girl.
So get this scene for just a second. So that is at the moment that our house was raided by the SWAT team, is when that part happened.
Yes.
So the entire street's blocked off. It's a nasty rainy day. It's 2 p.m. and I'm in handcuffs and she's standing there crying, you know, just raided the house. She's holding
There's
our
SWAT
baby.
team members on the roofs of our neighbor's house with shotguns pointed down at us.
And so just that scene right there at that moment, you know, if you had any hope, and that guy's coming into your life 3 times now. Warning her, and this time she's an adult and he's taking our daughter away.
Now, growing up, I was not the type that had dreams. My life was so bad that I didn't even dream. But I thought, you know what? One day I'll get married. It might last a year or two, but if we have children, I'll always have my kids. So when he came in and took her out of my arms, that was it for me. I was crushed. You mean someone can come in and take my little girl, you know, take my little girl from me. So in that moment, even though the police walked me out the front door and on my porch said, we will not take your daughter. We will not do anything to you if you tell us information on this person and this person. But by the way I had been raised, you just did not do that. So even though it was crushing to me, I still wouldn't turn anyone in. I still allowed that to happen. And so they ended up taking us to jail later. And then I just knew at that moment that I wasn't going to live this life anymore. I knew it. I was like, I am out. This is where my life, this party life, I'm done with. So Billy and I, Mindy's in foster care. She's 9 months old. She was in foster care for 30 days. And Billy's mom ended up taking temporary custody of her. Thank goodness we had someone in our life that could do that, because I was locked up with women. They didn't have any good people in their life that could take their children. I was locked up with women that had no idea where their children were. And so we ended up deciding that we wanted to change our life so bad.
I'm not sure if you interjected. We bonded out of jail, obviously, from the arrest. So paid our bond, got out of jail.
But we wanted to change our life so bad, and we knew that we could not do it living in the same town that I grew up in. Everyone I knew was in drugs. Everyone I knew didn't have a good life. So I knew that we had to remove ourselves from Muncie. So we decided, we got in our car, we went to Indianapolis, which was an hour away from Muncie, a much bigger town. And I ended up getting a job at a gas station. And we lived in Indianapolis in our car, homeless, until we were able to get up enough money to rent a place. But we were so determined. And you know what? We would take showers in the truck stop. we were willing to do whatever it took. And I can remember us talking, and we just wanted to meet all new friends. And so Billy ended up, they sent him to drug rehab. And so I'm in Indianapolis. While he's in drug rehab, I am working like the 3 to midnight shift. And I got robbed at gunpoint twice.
Oh, man.
And so when he gets out, he's like, if it happens one more time, you have to quit. So it happened again. And
it was like just a few days after I got out of drug rehab.
And
I knew something was up, because when she came home from work that night, like 11:30 or whatever, her boss also arrived in his car behind hers, and I knew.
Yeah.
They know I'm gonna make her quit. He's gonna try to talk me into letting her keep her.
Yeah.
So we ended up, Billy said, no, she cannot do that job anymore. And so the next day we ended up going to the gas station. It was payday. And so we were waiting for my check to come in the mail. And while we were there, a guy came into the gas station, and I had seen him a few times. He was a construction guy doing remodeling on a home nearby. And so I told him what had just happened. And then he was like, do you have any water? My truck is overheating. And so he comes back in and he says, I have no idea, but my truck is fine now. And at that time, Billy said, hey, we need to go because I need to go find a job. And the guy said, you need a job? Well, I'll give you a job right now. And he offered him the job. Billy accepted. And as we're sitting there talking, he says, by the way, Easter's coming up in a few weeks. Are you going anywhere for church? And I'm like, no, and so I'm getting excited. But we want to, and Billy's like, oh, great.
I was just getting a job out of the deal, not church. Come on.
Exactly, yeah. And so then he said, can my wife and I come to your house tonight and talk to you?
Who does that?
Yeah, I know. It's really bold.
He has the hook in Billy's mouth because he's got the job.
Right.
And so he feels like now he has to accept. He's like, yeah, sure. Come over. So him and his wife and his 14-month-old little girl comes over to our house in Fountain Square, Indianapolis. And we hardly had nothing. I mean, we barely got into the house, let alone have any furniture or anything. And so he is talking to Billy in the front room. Diana, his wife, is talking to me in the kitchen. We're sitting on the floor because there was no kitchen table. And she is telling me about the second coming of Christ. And I'm thinking, hurry up, pray for me because I'm going to miss it. I'm thinking
any moment now.
Seconds, yes. And so she leads me through the prayer. Now, mind you, I've wanted this since back at White's. I remember how I felt and the love I felt from Christians and just that whole, going to chapel and all that. So I wanted that back. And so she walked me through the prayer. I rededicated my life that night. So the next day, we go to the church, and it's a little church in a neighborhood, and we pull up in the church. You can hear, it's like boom, boom, boom. The music is so loud, and we're looking at each other, going, are we going to go in there? And
that's an important piece about this. Can we interject real quick to this? Is because go back to when we were laying in bed at night talking about going to a church. Because both of us had some kind of an experience as little kids at a church. And I can remember saying to you, when we do go to church one day, we'll dress up. And I want to go to one of those ones that has lots of stained glass windows. That's what I really said. Lots of fancy woodwork.
Now, mind you, as we're laying in bed higher than kite, talking about one day we're going to get.
And I remember saying to you, and we'll go, and it'll be like an hour. It'll take 1 hour, and then we'll go eat. That's all I can think about.
And then
church.
Sunday chicken.
Yeah, when we show up at this church, you were saying. I just wanted to interject that.
Now, mind you, we've been living, like crazy lives the whole time we had been together. So our clothes, our whole appearance said unsaved. You know what I'm saying? Like crazy living, we had on ripped up pants, ripped up shirts. And so we walk into this church and there's probably maybe 50 people in there. It's not a very big sanctuary at all. And we're all the way at the back of the church and they're singing and we're looking around for this couple and guess where they're at? The front row. And we're thinking, no way, we are definitely not. And so don't you know, they turned around, saw us and motioned for us to come on up. And so we go to the front and then I'll let Billy take over from here because he tells the story much better than I.
And let you finish. So that church, you remember it as 100. It was a real small, like white building. Reminded me something off that old TV show, Little House on the Prairie, about the size of that. And it was like the whole church was bouncing up and down. When we went in, we felt like needles were sticking in our body all over. It was so uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And it seemed like a bunch of people were dancing and hands were up and super
tambourines.
The church was packed. It seemed packed. And so that at that moment,
that was so foreign to us at that moment. Yeah,
it's totally different than what we talked about at night. That one night, going into a traditional type situation. And I just remember that night standing on the front row because they saved us the seats, and we kept leaning over to each other saying, "We're not coming back.
We are not coming back.
Job or no job." And literally that night, this is God's honest truth. The pastor, he at one point of the music, they were dancing and stuff, and I was not used to that at that time. So kicks off his shoes and literally climbs up on the piano and dances. And we're on the front row. We're just like,
we are less.
And I knew about some churches would do those kinds of things or whatever. That was not what we had really in mind. So
I don't think I've seen that either in all the years that we've been to churches.
Never experienced that.
This one really got me. So imagine our first moment, and I'm trying to hold on to all the pride I can. I got this trying to hang on to this reputation that we had from the street. You don't want to see anybody. You just want to you control your whole life. And nothing moves you. Those kind of things. And there was no band. There was no nothing, but they were singing and dancing and worshiping to CDs, I guess, or whatever it was, And the pastor's wife was leading it. And remember, she at one point she stops the music and she says, "All right, is there any real men out there that love Jesus?" And all these men in the church start yelling and shouting. And I'm thinking, I'm not going to yell or shout or anything. I'm just going to watch them do it. And then she says, "Are you sure? Let me hear you shout again." And they did it again. She got them really hyped up and she said, "Are you real men of God?" And they were like, "Yes, yes, yes." And then she said, "Okay, if you're a real man of God, we're going to run that music back again. I want you to get up out of that seat and come up here on this stage and dance before the Lord."
And I'm looking at Billy thinking, "So you're going to go?"
And I did not go, and I thought they can call me what they want. I'm not going up there. I watched these men get up, and so that was our first experience there.
Yes, so we're like, we are definitely not coming back. So this was Wednesday night. So Billy starts.
Well, I'm sorry, I had to interject again. They had a prayer line too. We'd never seen one of those before.
Oh yeah.
Oh, okay.
People lined up, and praying for them. And the pastor was like laying hands on them and praying, laying hands on their head, praying and stuff for them.
Yes, and so he goes to work with Jeff the next few days, and then Saturday, he's like, "So are we going to go to church?" And I'm like, "Yeah, let's go to church." And so again, Sunday, we are not coming back here. But you know what? We go home Sunday and we open the Bible and we start reading. And I'm reading out loud to him. He picks it up. He's reading out loud to me. And so I read a paragraph and I'm like, "So do you understand that?" He's like, "No." "Do you understand it?" "No." but we continued to read.
And
it took like a whole hour to get through one chapter because always had a King James Bible.
That's the only Bible. So it was just so foreign. And so over the next 6 weeks, every Wednesday, every Sunday, are we going? Yeah, let's go. And then we started to enjoy it. And Billy picked up the tambourine and started playing the tambourine.
One of those churches where they allowed the tambourine to kind of float around the sanctuary. And so it really, which is not always a good idea because that's basically somebody in the congregation that's like another band member, right? So but I ended up playing it. Like, 3 weeks, maybe 2.5 weeks.
So here's this tough-looking guy. We're waiting on trial. We've already got a trial date in April to go before trial. And the pastor of that little church ended up being an Indianapolis sheriff's deputy. And we never told him what we were going through because we thought, he's going to assume that we started going to his church so he could help us out. So I ended up getting baptized the night before I went to trial, not knowing that a couple days later we were going to be found guilty and be given 6-year prison term each. And so, but that couple, Jeff and Diana, the whole 2 years that we were in prison, continued to come and see us. Not only did they continue to come and see us, they allowed us to call them collect, which at the time was crazy expensive. But their mom, Jeff and Diana's mom and dad, came to see me in prison every single week for 2 years.
That's amazing.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
And so everyone that, so when we got out of prison, we ended up staying right there in Indianapolis, started going to church, and we completely changed our lives.
That's great.
So,
I love how, you guys had this little in-between period, this window of opportunity, if you will, and you just thought, well, I'll just get a job at the gas station or, and little did you know at the time that it was a positioning that God was doing for you so that that man could come and meet you and then give Billy a job and then, hey, come to church. And but before you got your sentencing to go into jail, I just think that's so cool that sometimes we just think we're doing our la-di-da, just trying to get through life, and God's like, no, you're in my timing. Ordered. Yeah. Your steps are ordered by the Lord and he puts laborers in the field. I love that. And so, you guys go from this, age 9, starting to do drugs and, just teenage years and into your early 20s and jail time. But looking at you now, knowing if someone saw you on the street, they would have no idea.
Never. Yeah.
And we know that's the power of Jesus. But so tell us about your ministry and how God took those ashes and turned them into something beautiful. I know you have a book, Jodi, and you guys travel and you minister together. But just tell us about that process of your ministry and what you do.
Okay, well, so when we got out, Mindy was 3.5 years old when we got out. This was a God blessing. Within 2 months of us getting out, we were given full custody back of Mindy, which is almost unheard of.
Yeah.
And so we, at this time, as soon as we got out, started going to church every Sunday night, every Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday, anytime the door was open, we were there. And then so for until we, until our kids were grown, I would stay home with them. And Billy, he had so much word in him, he just had to get it out. So then he started shortly, within a few months of us being out, doing a nursing home ministry, because that's the only place that would let him come in, because he was a felon. And so he did nursing home ministry.
So let me go talk to the elderly people.
He did nursing home ministry, and then our pastor at our church wanted to open up an inner city ministry. And so we became pastors of that inner city ministry, which was only a couple blocks from the original prison that I had went in when I had first was sent to prison. That was only 2 blocks from the inner city church. And then we started doing prison fellowship with Chuck Colson, and did that for several years. And then Billy started doing praise and worship. And then he became an evangelist, started traveling around to churches, and then
so probably about that, there was a lot of different things, that you're trying to find out exactly where it is that the Lord wants you. So you're really just you're just stepping out because you have this in your heart to do ministry. And we just really felt that calling. And so there's a lot of different things that we did.
Yes.
Because we both had became instructors with prison fellowship ministry. So for several years we did that. But then I think, gosh, when we went full time in ministry, it was like, I remember our first year traveling, it was 29 prisons we were in and 26 churches our first year.
Oh, wow.
And it was a lot still sharing the testimony and, seeing what the Lord would have us to speak through his word, and then mix it with the testimony. And then of course music was involved.
Yes.
And then the schools, we started
when we were in Branson.
We lived in Branson, Missouri, y'all's location. The Lord had spoke to me about taking our story to the public schools and inviting. Now this is public schools, okay? So when you think about what the Lord did with our ministry through public schools, 99.9% of all of it was public schools. So you had to be clever. Yeah. Remember, Jesus said the children of the world were wiser in their day than the children of light. And it also says he who wins souls is wise. So we really had to think about how we're going to do this. And so we would go to public schools sharing our story without any gospel, but because you couldn't do that, but the anointing, God was still showing up with his presence.
That's good.
And so we did that for
10 years.
Well, 15 years. We still will get invitations and things like that, but that was the main focus for 15 years. But 5 years into that, the Lord began to speak to you about your book.
He started saying, you need to write a book. And I'm like, no, Lord, you're talking to me. Don't you know who you're talking to? No one wants to hear my story. Matter of fact, up until that point, I hid my story. I didn't want my friends to know, certain details. I mean, everyone we were around knew that we were in prison and things like that, but the deeper story that I didn't tell people about. And I'm like, Lord, are you sure this is Jodi you're talking to? Don't you mean to be talking to someone else? And then it started becoming real to me. Like, I do need to write a book. And then he gave me the name of the book, which originally it started off, which it is in the title, but he gave me the name, The Prostitute's Daughter. And I was like, oh, wow. Okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to write my book. It took me several years to write my book. I would do one to 2 chapters at a time, and it would take me months to heal from that. But I tell you, I feel like that the book was meant for my personal healing, but that it was also meant for the people that are reading my story, because everyone, I mean, I have heard this over and over again of I need to start telling my testimony.
That's good.
I've hidden my testimony all over these years. And after I've read your book, I need to start telling my testimony more. And I'm like, absolutely, you do. And so it right before my book was being released, right before we went on Winter Jam tour. So we're like, okay, well, Winter Jam is a family friendly, what should I do? And that's when it became beautifully Unbroken, the prostitute's daughter. And I was broke for many, many years, broken. My spirit was broken. Everything about me was broken. But me and finding a new life in Jesus, all that was mended. And I want to share that. I want to quickly share a story. This happened a few weeks ago, and it kind of opened my eyes. I have family in Muncie, and I was going over to some family's house, and there was two of my family that I know to be on meth or something heavy. Just in their appearance, they're not even on this earth. And so as I pulled into the driveway, I could see one of them, she was sitting in a lawn chair, and she had kind of passed out. And so, and then I saw him walking around the yard. And so I pulled up, and then he noticed me, and he came up and he said, oh, so-and-so's not here. And I said, oh, okay. Well, then she woke up, and I could tell she was on some really heavy drugs. And she comes up to my car, and I'm talking to him about this person. When she comes home, have her call me. And so then this girl speaks up, and she said, Jodi, and she holds up my book. She's holding my book. That's awesome. And she said, Jodi, I brought your book downstairs today, and I'm going to read it. And because of being on whatever she was on, that's when I pulled up and saw. But isn't that amazing?
Timing,
because I looked at her and was, well, you always want so much better, especially when you see people on drugs and all that, and how it happened for us. And I know it can happen for them. And over the years, you just kind of get numb to it. And so when I looked over and I saw her, I was sad for her, and then here she is next to my vehicle, holding up my book, going,
wow.
I brought this downstairs, and I'm going to read it.
Yeah. Wow.
And I left there going, oh, wow, how many times have I looked down on a person just because it's happened for a long, long time now. And I want this person that I was coming to see to be able to get out from that. I feel like that was a wake-up call to me, because there is a whole generation of people that is on meth and crack and heavy stuff. And whether it's your children, whether it's your grandchildren, or just someone and you've prayed for them, and I know that they've been doing this for years, and I have prayed for them. But when I didn't see the change, how I became numb to it. And so when I pulled up and I saw her and I saw him, and I'm just like, when she held up my book, it was a whole different story. Because I'm going, that's there for you too. That your life can change that quick. And so that's why with my cover, I purposely made it to where it was not a cute little Christian cover. I'm like, the story inside is not cute or Christian. And now at the very, 2 chapters from the back of the book, that's where Christ comes in my life, and everything changed. But I wanted, when someone looked at my cover of my book, to know that the little girl in the front has been through some stuff. And you know what? People that have struggles in their life, they're attracted to the copy. to the cover of my book for a reason. And I have had so many people come up, and I actually think, and I've thought this even when I was writing, that it could be used even as a witnessing tool. Like if you see someone in your life like that, hand them this book, because Christ, everything that happens to me, believe me, they know about, and they're going to be able to relate to. And then I tell the story of how Billy and I get saved. And so, yeah, that was just like a wake up moment for me of, wow. So.
Well, and I just think it can be easy for us to get weary in the well-doing and get weary in the praying and interceding, because sometimes situations seem so hopeless, especially when it's been years and years and years. And especially like with you guys knowing personally like what it's like to be in that situation and to know how bleak it can be. But I know, just even like listening before you told that story, just listening to your guys' story, and I'm like, wow, this is the transformation power that Jesus can bring into lives. Like you know, because I'm sure there were some people that were praying for you that were kind of getting hopeless because
we know someone out there was praying for us for sure.
Yeah, but they kept doing it, you know, and kept interceding, and that change did come. It took maybe till your early 20s or so, but it came. And like Alicia said, now looking at you two, like I would have never in a million years guessed. But just also the power of not forgetting where we came from and what God brought us out of, because like you said, like that's what's going to minister to the broken and to the lost and to those who are on drugs. And even it's not just like the strangers out there, but even your own family. Like our stories are so important to share.
And I think too, what if you told God no? Or what if you had allowed that insecurity of, I'm not a writer, do you know my background, this, that, and the other, to keep you from writing that book and sharing your story? And little did you know, your act of obedience could be the very thing that brings your family member breakthrough, or people you won't even know about this side of heaven. And so that's an encouragement to our listeners as well. If the Lord's asking you to be vulnerable and to share those parts of your story, we know it's not easy. We know, like you said, it took you a chapter at a time and months of processing and grieving, and then before you took on the next thing. But the Lord used it in a multifaceted way. He brought healing to you through processing it and not shoving it under a rug, and it's bringing breakthrough to others. And so that's such a powerful part of your testimony. And so we're going to continue praying for those family members and praying. That's what we pray, you know, with our music or with our books or with this podcast. We pray, Lord, we lift up those that are going to be listening to it, that whether it's tomorrow or years from now, Lord, just we pray for those that are going to be listening to it, and may it just be a connection point to you, God. And so that's awesome.
So tell us where we can order a copy of Beautifully Unbroken and just get in contact with you and your ministry, and maybe people want to have you guys come out to speak. We want to know all that information.
Okay, well, you can go to billyballenger.com. That right there has the tour dates. You can purchase the book. Everything is right on that site. And then I also have my own website, which is jodiballenger.com. And
you can find all the information right there to be able to get them what they need. And
yes,
we'd love to come.
I have hard copies for $25 and paperbacks for $20. And I would like to one day, when I'm not so busy, to actually do what is it? The voice books. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
The audio book.
Yeah.
Audio book. Yes. Because there's so many people. Even I prefer to switch on that audio book. So
I know
it's convenient.
I know a lot of people that listen to them. So
one day I'm going to be able to say I have an audio book. As well.
Yeah, that's us too. One day we will.
Awesome. Yes.
Awesome. Well, we just appreciate you so much for coming on the show today and just being vulnerable, sharing your story, because we know it's gonna bless our listeners.
Yes. Yep.
So,
well, thank you so much.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Come Up Crew, for joining us again today.
Yes.
And we'll be back next week with her husband, Billy.
Yeah.
So you don't want to miss that, because I know he has an incredible story too. So we will see you next week.
God bless.
Hey, thanks for listening to today's episode. One of the greatest ways we come up higher is through worship, and it's our desire to help you create meaningful worship moments through the music that we create.
Yeah, you can stream our music on Google, Spotify, Apple Music, or wherever you stream music. And physical copies of our albums are available at our store at aliciaandwhitney.com.
So join us in coming up higher together through worship.